You were the first one to come in Forbes top AI guy in India. How does it feel?
I'm not a scammer yet. Believe in your own bullshit for a very long time till the world figures out that you are actually correct. Not many people in India at any given point are at the forefront of tech.
How do you think about marketing? Right? How do you think about GTM?
If the product is so good and novel that it has word of mouth, then the marketing works. Otherwise, marketing is just so hard, it's not going to matter. Folks in China have way better product chops than like we in India have. That is a learning that probably like we had in the back in those days. We somewhere lost it and now we have it again.
So, Soham, welcome to this podcast, Next Big Opportunity. So, the idea of this podcast is to actually enthuse young founders or next set of founders to really build global outcomes from India. So, I'm really glad you've put India on the World AI map, first one to put AI on the map. So, we'll start with a little bit of your introduction. I think if you can tell us about yourself, where are you from, how did you arrive in Bangalore, what's your initial journey like before you started Composio? So let's start to getting to know you first.
Oh, yeah. This can go very deep, so stop me wherever. So I'm Soham, born and brought up in Ahmedabad. Sort of my dad started up way back when I was little. My mom side of family also runs a startup. So like kind of brought up in like this whole startup centric family where um, it was like a very simple thing to sort of do a startup and it was a normal thing to do it, right? Ended up sort of studying in IIT Bombay. I think I was lucky enough to sort of get in there and like sort of meet some really brilliant people out there. So spent like 2013 to 17 in IIT Bombay studying computer science. Spent a bunch of time there, sort of like learning to program. It was like my first time. So I was like unlucky enough that the first time I had laptop was almost like my 12th grade, like after I ended up sort of like completing JE. And so I got like to programming land like very late, but I really enjoyed it. Ended up spending like 4 years there. Recognize like one of the things that I wanted to always do was like startup because I've seen my dad do it, like my family do it. And so I started spending some time trying to learn entrepreneurship right in the college. I think like they had like this program where like you could do minor in entrepreneurship. I met some really cool sort of professors who had been in the industry before, who taught me like early on like how to sort of think about starting up, like what does it take, and like sort of teach me a bunch of small things. Ended up learning sort of entrepreneurship right there in like my college, and I think that was like my first time experiencing, oh wow, this is really cool, this is so complicated but it's so magical because you can do so many interesting things, like you can start up on so many interesting things and stuff like that. Ended up sort of doing a small POC kind of a startup where the idea was like I wanted to sort of build a small project where I do actual startup and like I learn from it and I document those learnings as a part of the course. That sort of project turned out to be my first real startup. This is 2017. AI was coming in hot. We had no idea about like how to think about market, how to understand all of that. But like the first thing you do is like you see, okay, something is interesting, something is clicking. Everyone wants like maybe customer service automation in India at that point in time, and so we just like decided to build that. That was my first startup. I was selling to enterprises right out of college. Probably like I would, let's just say, want no one to do that. It's really terrible. I really hated it. Enterprise selling right out of college was not what I expected in my life. I think that is how I ended up learning about something called founder market fit, where like it's really important that you work on something that appeals to you because otherwise you will never be able to sort of do your best. Ended up sort of like exiting that startup back in 2018, 19ish, and realized that this is not for me. I'll figure out some other startup where like actually the problem and like the things that we do kind of appeals to me. Ended up joining a startup called Bureau. Bureau was sort of building a risk and fraud sort of let's just say platform out there in 2020-ish. Ended up spending like 3 years learning a bunch of different things. I was the first employee there. So saw the team grow up, saw like sort of different funding rounds, saw like product growing, product working, not working, a bunch of different things out there, and ended up sort of learning a lot. And in 2023 realized like I'd sort of like done enough like job as such, and like at this point I was like really sort of itching to get back in the startup game. I was also tracking different problems out there, because like your brain's always active thinking about, and you always have a list of like problems to sort of work on. And so there's this problem which was like um, something that I faced in bureau, which is like how do softwares communicate, or like the integration hell as you call it, which is like as a developer or as a company out there, you end up spending so much time integrating a bunch of softwares together, because like most products today are like complicated products. They involve like data from different sources, they involve like a bunch of different sort of things out there. And so realize that this is a problem that makes so much sense to solve if like code generation becomes a thing. I was playing with GPT-2 back in the days, and then I was like seeing DaVinci coming in, code generation becoming better. So at some point, the confidence came in that, okay, I think like we can sort of mix this together. And that's how like sort of my journey into Composio began.
So that's how the Composio was born, right? So if I have to paraphrase or summarize, so you have been entrepreneur at heart, right, from very young age.
Yeah.
Then you tried multiple projects, which eventually became companies, some of them.
Yeah.
And then you decided, okay, this is not what I feel like doing. And then you went to the next one, and then finally you landed to where Composio is looking at the problem of solving the software communication or integration, so to speak, right? So I think the reason I'm summarizing this is because a lot of students do come to us or come to me sometimes and says, what's their advice if they want to start up today? And I always tell them that you just start doing a project and put the project out there and see who's really getting the love from your product, and that's how you build a company. If it is really product is really good, you will get enough traction.
I totally agree. I think like my litmus test to this is like, and this is something I also did while starting Composer, which is like you spend like couple of months on the same problem. If at some point after a couple of months the problem sort of excites you the same as it did like the first time you started, I think you should start up then. If the problem doesn't excite you enough, probably the like right call is not to start up or like not to work on that specific problem.
So can we start with what Composio does? I meet a lot of people and people have different opinion of what Composio does. So let's try to understand what Composio actually does.
Yeah. I think like to answer that, let me also sort of talk about what it does, and like also what we want it to do at some point, right? And we can sort of mix that up. So today, Composio is like the fastest way a developer can sort of build an AI agent or AI application that connects to a bunch of applications and interacts with them. If you think about like from a developer's perspective, they get into like a bunch of problems like auth, integrations, like tool calling and like function calling, and how do I sort of get my agent to connect with Salesforce the right way. And then they get into like a reliability kind of hell, which is like my agents are not really reliable. What do I do to get it right? And a bunch of other things. Composio solves for all of it into via a single platform. Think about us like infrastructure that sort of powers a bunch of like AI applications out there. Like that's what we did today. And like one of the confusions like I've often heard is like the website, if you open Composer's website today, it says some interesting things, which is like we build skills that evolve with your agents. And the idea behind that, very simply to put is like we sort of want to build infrastructure that allows your agent to sort of communicate with other software, but then become better and better for the over that communication as sort of time passes on.
So can you give an example? Can we simplify even further, or at least non-technical users? So give me a use case, give me an example of what exactly it does.
Sure. So think about like, let's say a very simple use case, which is like, hey, I want to build an email assistant that like sort of looks into my email, understands like what are spam emails, what are promotional emails, what are like emails that probably are really important, I should be responding them first to, and maybe what are like some other emails that for which like drafts could be created, reply drafts could be created and be kept on. Like as a developer, if you're building this agent out, like what you need to do is like you need to sort of authenticate your users Gmail. So let's say you have 1,000 users, they all connect their Gmail account, they all connect their Outlook account, they all connect like their Apple Mail account, something like that. Then you probably need to sort of get your agent to sort of receive every single sort of email out there that your user gets, process it, maybe create a draft reply on it, maybe move it to the spam folder, maybe sort of reply directly to it, maybe directly alert the user saying, hey, a very important email came. Maybe eventually you want to sort of integrate CRM to your agent, and sort of every time a customer emails, you want to sort of create an automatic entry into your CRM, right? And a lot of that requires you sort of connecting all of these tools together to your agent. We make it really easy. So yeah, using Composio, like you could probably spin this up in like less than 30 minutes. And like that's what the sort of core offering is.
So when did you realize that you really hit upon something really big, or is really a big customer problem?
Yeah, I think like we started with a very interesting problem, right? So the journey was, and this is why I said like problems will change, but like some things will remain constant. So the journey was, we initially started with the whole sort of and I like to think like this is probably like a better way to start off, which is like you don't start with a problem, you start with a space, or maybe like a sort of some nebulous idea of like what the problem looks like, which is like for us, the space was like software to software communication, right? Which is like every time a software has to communicate to other software, there's a developer in the middle that is sort of building that like infrastructure. Is there a way you can sort of make it better? You can make it really good and make it like just work. When we started off, we realized we were sort of building like this infrastructure for like the old school kind of softwares, right? So you had Microsoft Excel that had to sort of connect with maybe your sort of like, let's say, finance app or maybe your tax app. And like you could do that potentially using Composio, at least that was the idea. At some point, we realized that this is like not going to be relevant considering like we ourselves seeing how agents were improving, becoming better over time, and realized like maybe we should be sort of like looking at our own problems, which were like we were building agents that used to connect with GitHub because we were building complete coding agents back in 2023. This is way ahead of its time. Like we're probably very few teams out there were building coding agents that used to like act like complete software developers. So we used to connect with GitHub. We used to connect with a bunch of different sort of tools. We used to sort of make it so that like the agent could like almost act like a complete engineer, and realize that this is such a big problem for us connecting all of those things. What if we could sort of just build integration infrastructure for AI agents? This was like a very personal problem. We didn't really know if people needed it. There were not enough people out there to do like a proper user research as such. And so it was a very intuition based call that, hey, this makes so much sense. We are so much bullish on integration, like agents as such. I think this will become a real problem at some point and we should just solve for it.
When we meet and we work with so many companies that together who come to us, so I think Indian ecosystem is now able to build somewhat world class product in some areas, right? But a lot of us struggle from how do you think about marketing, right? How do you think about GTM? Let's say I build this cool product which I think is cool, which I think is solving a customer pain point. So how should I even think? What is the mental model of thinking when you are an engineer and haven't had that experience of GTM before, right? So what is the mental model of thinking about go to market or marketing at this
Yeah.
point in time?
And it's going to piss some people off. Okay. So I think like I've been through this journey for over the last 1.5 years. I've realized, learned some things, unlearned some things, and kind of sort of learned them back. And I'll tell you like my mental sort of perspective. I think at that point in time, so this is like I'm guessing December 2023. We are just planning to launch our sort of new Composio platform, which was like the whole sort of idea of like agents could connect to a bunch of sort of like tools out there. Um, very very early, I think like one of the things that you have to recognize, like one of the questions he asked was like, why do you think in India um, people like sometimes are not able to build those like infra products or not able to take those calls? I think like the real reason is like that like there are many reasons I would say, but like couple of reasons that immediately might come to my mind is like, one is to take those calls, you have to be kind of at the forefront of tech. And like, not many people in India at any given point are at the forefront of tech. Probably like one of those things. The second reason I would think about is I think India lacks, or maybe like that's a strong statement, but India has very few strongly opinionated founders. And like I've seen like a lot of young founders that I talk to, that I look up to, which are really strongly opinionated, and it feels really like good that like to meet them. I think India needs like way more opinionated founders. And like how that helps is that if you're opinionated enough, you can believe in your own bullshit for a very long time till the world figures out that you are actually correct.
I think it's a lot to do with having been in the ecosystem for last 2 decades now. I
Yeah.
think it is also closely linked to the risk taking. See, when you say encouragement,
Exactly,
right? So if I'm willing to take, like, when we invested in
Yeah.
Composio that time, there was
Yeah.
nobody investing in AI infra at that point in
Yeah.
time, right? So it is also about taking those large risks,
Yeah.
and that large risks then kind of helps you
Yeah,
give that confidence.
I agree, right? Like, it's like, okay, so if you have investors who don't really call you and they're like, just do what you're doing, right? That helps, right? If you have friends who are like going to believe in your stuff, that helps. But like, you need that kind of culture, right? Otherwise, like, it doesn't work. That's what I've realized.
Yeah, absolutely. But now at least we have some people like you who believe in this. I'm sure the start is already here, at least in the AI world.
Yeah.
And take it to, but coming back to the go-to-market, right?
Yeah. So
what was the thought process
yeah.
of the go-to-market?
So on the marketing, right? So on marketing, I have some thoughts, right? Like, so I think in the early days, you don't really like I was an engineering guy. My co-founder is a core engineering person. We both come from engineering background. We have no idea how marketing works. So like, what do you do? So we decided the easiest thing we could do is we basically wrote like a really nice article on what the product does. We wrote some really good sort of like, and it's developer marketing at the end of the day, right? So you write some really good examples out there, and then you spam the like every single channel that exists. So we went to a lot of discords and we basically just pasted our snippets, we pasted our code, like, hey, this is amazing stuff we built, can you check it out, right? We ended up like going to a bunch of sort of forums out there, Slack forums and stuff. We spammed a lot of folks out there saying, hey, we did this, can you check it out? And like, the fundamental core truth that I realized about marketing after a lot of like learning and learnings is that if the product is so good and novel that it has word of mouth, then the marketing works. Otherwise, marketing is just so hard, it's not going to matter. At the end of the day, if I have to sort of work, let's say, if I have to spend 100 hours on marketing, I'd probably spend like 80 hours on making product in some way word of mouth capable, and 20 hours on the actual marketing. And that is a learning that probably like we had in the back in those days. We somewhere lost it and now we have it again. So
I
that's the journey.
think so. I'm glad that you said word of mouth, and when I see a lot of startups who launch their products, which is either developer or consumer oriented, I know there is a kind of trend to start with influencer marketing, but actually word of mouth is the most purest form of marketing, which can give the maximum leverage if you can crack it, right? And it's hard to crack, especially when the noise is increasing so much day by day.
I think influencer marketing helps. So we have done influencer marketing, we have done Google Ads,
Yeah.
we've done like a bunch of different sort of places, right? But I think like word of mouth is the base on which all of the other stuff is built. And so if the word of mouth is good, it's like pouring petrol into fire. But if that doesn't work, like all the other stuff just doesn't matter.
So let's say when a company is starting up, they try word of mouth, they also try some influencer marketing. So what are some thumb rules of how much? Let's say you have $100,000 to spend on marketing. What are some thumb rules of organic versus paid marketing? How much will you spend on influencer marketing? Any mental models on that?
I think it depends a lot. Okay, so first of all, when you say organic marketing, what do you mean? Like
See, organic is word of mouth primarily.
But word of mouth is not. I'm not paying for it.
Yeah.
It's organic by the nature of it. Is like I'm not spending money on it, right? What like I like to now measure is like is it's very simple, but like what's the probability that if like 100 people come to the platform, um, like what's the amount of people they will tell about my product to? Like I think like one of the things that people mess up, and like I kind of messed it up, was like you are under pressure to sort of ramp up users, ramp up growth, because like fundamentally that is what sort of matters, right? And so what the mistake you make is like you sort of don't optimize your like product quality word of mouth, and you optimize the growth first, and like that sort of messes you up because your growth is not as economical. And so let's say if I had 100,000 to spend, that 100,000 probably would be way better spent if I had like really good sort of word of mouth, right? And that's the only thing, right? Like Cursor didn't spend any money if you think about it, at least to a point, right? But like the growth came from like like I told probably 30 people to start using Cursor, right?
So now you have $100,000
Yeah.
with you, right, to spend. So where are you going to spend that money after that? So your base, of course, is understood.
One thing that I like okay, let me specify the channels, right, that we spend money on today. So we spend money on influencers. I think at some point influencers used to work really well.
Yeah.
If you think about it recently though, what has happened is that like the cost arbitrage that you had on influencer model has kind of gone really bad, simply because there's just so much demand. And like one of the crazy things that has happened is like earlier it was just startups that used to do influencer marketing. Now you have OpenAI, Gemini, like you have like all of this like large company and teams out there that do influencer marketing, and they just almost have unlimited money out there. And so they can spend a lot more money than you can. And so like my take on that is influencer marketing we still do, but like the return on it has kind of
Yeah, that'll
collapsed.
happen because now it's a very
Yeah,
discovered channel, right?
yeah. So that's one. The second channel sort of out there is like from a developer perspective, you can do a lot of like tutorials and like sort of like YouTube marketing, right? YouTube marketing works. Like for us, it has been giving pretty good results. So if I had to spend like $100,000, I'll probably say like very good explainer videos that sort of talk about your product. I'll probably end up spending like 20 to 30% just on that across different this is a mix of influencers, but also like just like very good explanatory stuff around your sort of product. It works really nicely simply because a lot of people, developers now just go to YouTube and start searching. So there is another channel. We do a lot of GitHub marketing. GitHub marketing is not costly. It just like takes like a lot of effort because you're building these small projects. You are trying to get them viral.
Right.
You are maybe creating a lot of value for like developers out there, but then it requires like just sort of hiring more people who are able to sort of do those kind of like projects and like take those out. I'd probably end up spending like 30-40% of money on that, actually just hiring those folks out there who can build those projects, and those projects can eventually just take off on their own. So that's like another channel that's working really nicely. Ads, we have like touched very little. The problem is like developer ads don't work, but at some point in like life cycle your sort of product matures, and like where enterprises start coming to you, ads do work on enterprises. So it's a mixed bag. We have just started tinkering around with it. We probably spend like out of our budget like 5% on ads, very little, in terms of like let's say 5K a month, right, or something like that. And y- you don't really expect like a lot of return from it immediately, but like we're just sort of experimenting with that space right
Understand.
now.
So a little bit double clicking on this influencer marketing, right?
Yeah,
As it works, but it's become expensive now, and also efficacy
yeah.
has to be thought through. So let's go down a little bit deeper into that. So how do you choose which influencers to choose? I
Um,
see startups really struggle with that, right? The question is basically, do you go narrow? Do you go broad? Do you go with adjacent influencers? Go with very specific influencers? So how do you kind of create that matrix?
one thing I like that has really worked for us is experiment. Like I can give you a very real example, right? So um at some point everyone was talking about like oh, ChatGPT, Atlas, browser, and everyone. Before that, at some point, everyone was talking about cloud code and skills and stuff. And so you know that this kind of content is right now resonating, and these are the users for which it is resonating. These are the influencers for which it is resonating. At some point, N10 was resonating, right, to a lot of users. And so you want to sort of time your content pieces like that way. What we do is we have like kind of some semi-autonomous agents written that essentially figure out, scrape all these influencers. Yeah.
All right. So now, uh, just to summarize, we have good base in word of mouth. Then we started building some marketing techniques, YouTube marketing, maybe influencer marketing on top of it, right? Then comes the step which I think a lot of startups, a lot of founders sometimes don't believe in, is actually the branding, right? Because the actual next step is a paid marketing or a performance marketing, right? But I think there's a step in between which is branding, because brand gives you the uniformity of obviously the message, value proposition. I know you think very strongly about branding, and I'm really glad that you do. So I would love to, for audience, I want to really understand your thought process. Why did you decide to spend money on branding, right?
Has anyone looked at like a bunch of companies out there that have like insane stock valuations and really revenue? Maybe not so shitty, but like um, I think we all know those US companies that I'm talking about, right? Um, and like if you look at like what's common, right? It's branding, right? I think like branding really works because the perception that you hold for the company changes just because of like where you sort of hear it and like the nature of it, right? I think like one of the US funds, for example, that does like an incredible job at branding is like Founders Fund, right? If you look at like every single company that they have, uh, it company probably has impeccable, like insanely good branding out there. The way sort of they present themselves, the way they talk about like themselves, the way everything goes together is like amazing, right? A16Z does like amazing job in US, right? Like with a lot of their companies, eventually. Like an example would be like, if you have like an amazing brand, hiring a really good person is way easier compared to like not having that kind of a brand. And like that could be two companies doing exactly the same thing, probably one company doing better, but like just like the brand itself reflects like very different. Like I don't know if I should say take this example, but like an example is like, check out like Airbnb versus like booking.com. Like who do you hold like more respect for, right? Like I think probably Airbnb. Like everyone thinks about Airbnb.
That's also because Brian Chesky is that founder coming from design background. And he
Yeah,
understands branding
like
really well.
amazing branding, right? Have you looked at the stock price though? Booking has done way better than Airbnb. As a company, Booking has done amazingly well, right? But like, if you ask me, oh, which company do you like more? Like my intuitive answer is like Airbnb. If you ask me where would I invest, maybe not Airbnb, maybe Booking, right? But like, what I'm trying to get to is like, branding creates a perception in your brain and perception in like other folks that somehow this company is like so good, that I want to work for it. Maybe I want to become the customer. Maybe I want to get associated to this company, right? In some way or another.
So what does brand in a developer tool market or AI infra market where you're in, what does branding mean? The reason I'm saying, we have a lot of first time founders who listen to this podcast, right? And so branding, does it mean the logo design? Does it mean writing down a value proposition? Does it mean, writing a positioning, or does it mean all of them?
Maybe like couple of things I could sort of talk more about, right? That would like, so I used to think like, what, for a very simple example, why does our website have to be good? Like, right, at the end of the day, we were developers sort of focused play. Most people came to our docs, they used our product, they're super happy. Like that's pretty much all that matters. Why should I be spending like maybe a month of my life and like actually just working on website and like improving the website? Like a very simple thing is like, website sort of eventually translates into brand, right?
Yeah.
For example, the day we sort of revamped our website, some of the largest sort of and the biggest startup CEOs came in and said the website is like really amazing, right? Who did it, or like how did you guys do it, right? And like that was brand, right? Because they associated good website to Composio brand, and for them now Composio stood out for something good, right?
Yeah.
I think that's like what branding is. Like the first time we threw an event, the event was so good, everyone in SF was like, holy shit, you guys are like really good at throwing events. So that event became sort of a part of the brand.
So how much should a startup spend on a branding, or how much should you go about thinking about how much should I spend on branding? So I'll tell you why I'm asking this question, because a lot of time people think that now I have word of mouth, I have influencer marketing, I've got early growth, and now I have this budget, right? Should I now split the budget into performance marketing and branding, or should I spend only on performance marketing, right? So that's the kind of dilemma that a lot of founders go into, or the founding teams go into, right?
So I was talking to someone who was basically building a competitor to 11 Labs, maybe like 1.5 years back, right? Or like who built one of the largest competitors to 11 Labs. They eventually got acquired and stuff like that, right? And I asked them, right, like, why did you guys lose to 11 Labs, for example, right? Like, you had like much better like sort of like product, I thought, at least for a while, right? And like the answer was very surprising. The answer was like, we did a far better job at growth. We had like way better SEO. We had like amazing ads, but they just had like incredible brand. And like at some point, we lost to their brand. And like that answer kind of amazed me, right? Because like that showed like the power of brand. And I was like, how much money did you end up spending? And like, of course, it was like millions, right, in marketing. But like, how much? Like then what I understood was 11 Labs spent way more money on just like cultivating that brand right out there. And like so like the way I would think about it is like, money spent on brand is like something that like comes back way more in today's world. We ended up spending like close to like 100K already so far in last 4 to 5 months on brand, combining everything, and it has probably given us like way more reward.
See, what I've seen is Chinese does an amazing job, right? They
Yeah.
launched DeepSeek. Everybody knew DeepSeek is launched, right? They launch Manas. Everybody, all of us know India and the US and around the world.
Sure.
So what do they have to? What is to learn from them? Have you spent some time reflecting, researching on that?
I have very different answers though.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah, like we can talk. Okay, so the first answer, I think, folks in China have way better product chops than like we in India have. I think the reason for that is because they at some point had a very, very, very competitive consumer landscape. If you look at like just the amount of companies that used to do taxi rides and like how many companies existed at some point, how many sort of product folks grew out of those kind of companies, like you'll be boggled, right? Like that's more than probably Indian ecosystem at some point,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
When you think about DeepSeek, I do think they had like that China US advantage. The timing and the sort of the angle at which they came in was like very, very like specific around it. But like
But any branding lessons?
the branding lesson that maybe I can take away specifically is from like Manas or like Janspark, which is like, so with a lot of Chinese companies, they in fact have disadvantage when they enter US. Very serious disadvantage because people treat them like Chinese companies,
Yeah.
right? And so they're not super okay with like using the products at some point at least. And so I don't think like they did like some different work on branding. I just think like they had really good sort of product itself and like good product skills to like make sure that every small tweak that should be done has to be done so that the product is very easy to use. Like,
So you're saying that basically product chops are.
I think it's pure.
So it's a product experience in the end, which
Yeah.
user falls in love with, and therefore the brand starts moving. Yeah, absolutely. So just to go back to the chain of thought, right? So word of mouth, then influencer marketing, branding, and then what comes after that? How much money do you spend on the performance marketing after that?
We spent very little. We just started off, so we're not done that much work
I
there.
understand. Fundraising is always one part of founder journey, right?
Yeah.
You always are fundraising. You always are selling your company, selling your brand. I think the point I'm trying to bring down is that a lot of founders do, and because India has probably top 10 investors who can do Series A, large checks, right, of that scale of 20 million plus, right, or maybe top 5, I don't know. And eventually, US is a larger market for fundraise, right? So if you can crack the code of raising Series A from the US, then obviously it opens up a larger market for India, Indian founders as such as well, right?
Yeah.
So any learnings from that? How is
So if you're raising like 20 million in US, it's not Series A, it's seed, right? You need to think about it that way. You are almost raising on a promise that you will deliver something. You are not raising on like what you have achieved so far. All the rounds that you end up raising on promise are usually the rounds that happen because you have shown something so drastic, so important. Customers out there really, really love you so much that they really want your product. And like these are customers not in India. These are customers across the globe, probably US, very tech first customers who have like options to use any product out there and they are still choosing to use your product. And so basically, these are customers out there who, after looking at everything out there, have decided that you are the best product in the world and they are using you. So I think that's really important that you have a lot of customers in that geography, specifically sort of some of them really love you and like want you to succeed and like who rave about you like every single day.
Yeah.
So I think like that's probably one thing I would say. The second thing I would say is like a lot of relationships in like US are not built immediately, but like they do require time. And like so basically, if you're planning to sort of raise at some point in time, ideally you should have gone and like been friends with and you should know people out there because I think it really helps if you know locals in the ecosystem, if you're almost a localite, truthfully, because the way they sort of talk to you, the way they sort of treat you is very different compared to someone who's just there visiting.
So then MCP got launched in February timeframe, right? And you were the only one on the map right now, at the time in January, who was kind of solving this problem of how LLMs are going to communicate with each other, right? Or integration link software, right? And then MCP launched. Everybody thought, now you can't have that kind of market domination that perhaps you could have in January, right? So what was the thought back then? How did you then change your strategy to now come back to be relevant again 6-8 months down the line?
Yeah, yeah, I know. It's like very interesting, right? Because MCB launched way back, just FYI, right? Like it launched like last 24, right?
We
At some
got
point.
popular only
But
on
yeah,
that.
exactly. That's my take, right? It's just like it got popular sometime around March
Yeah.
ish, right? Like it started getting some traction. I think like the nuance around MCP was like it was good and bad for us. Uh, and like we at that point had no idea like what will it be more good, will it be more bad. I think like one of the things that we did good that we realized at that point in time, which is like there's this wave that is coming along, and so first thing first, let's just ride on that wave. And so we rode on that wave, right? Like we got a lot of popularity because of being one of the largest players in the MCP ecosystem, and like that got us like a lot of traction, a lot of sort of eyeballs, and that helped us a lot, right? But the core part still was like, okay, how does this affect us? Where do we actually have value? Where do we don't? What gets commoditized? How do we change our stuff? And I think that calculation and that just figuring out takes time, because you're also looking for the market to sort of mature and like give you some signals in like what's really happening. For us, we realized like a lot of our core value props kind of didn't really change after 3 4 months after MCB launched, which was like integration still suck, auth is still not a solved problem, people really need something like this, right? And they're still coming to us regardless, right? Maybe they are coming and consuming us via MCP, maybe they are coming and consuming us via not an MCP, but at the end of the day the same audience is coming for almost the similar kind of problems. And like here's the new part in the ecosystem that we need to sort of kind of own, kind of sort of take in. And so we sort of adapted to it.
What has Composio achieved so far? You have, as I understand, 200,000 developers on the platform. It is all, all bottoms up, right?
Yeah.
It is just using the product, which people loved it and continue to use it. You have 1 million tool calls now, right? In every week, 1 million tool calls every
Uh,
week,
yeah.
right? You have 50,000 plus integrations, tools integration that you enable on the platform, right?
Yeah.
So do you use any AI internally to do that, to write your own code?
Yeah, like so the whole premise around it was
Because 50,000, tool integrations looks a lot, right? And you have a
yeah.
small team. Total team is 30, maybe number of engineers, or maybe 15, 20, right?
Yeah.
So how do you make that happen?
Yeah, so we sort of understood very early on that like if we went with the whole approach of like building integrations on our own, we would probably end up like hiring like 50 people. We'll build a really large team, and like maintaining and like sort of building those integrations would take a long time. And like some of those integrations are really complicated and messy. Think about like Salesforce integration, HubSpot integration, Coupa integration, like all these enterprise apps out there, right? And like we realized like we didn't really want to do that, right? We wanted to build them fast, we wanted to build it in a way that they could sort of self mature and self sort of like maintain. And so we started building like our complete agent stack to sort of do that. We used to build agents to do integrations for normal softwares, we started doing agents to do integrations for agents itself, right? We started building on that stack like close to like a year and a half back. We ended up sort of at this point like automating almost like probably around 95 96% of work that goes into building an integration. Yeah, we did like, for example, Coupa is like a very complicated, just to give you a recent example, we ended up integrating Coupa in less than 4 hours.
Wow, that's magical, man.
Yeah,
I have worked with Coupa and I've worked with SAP integrations. That's really, really complex.
exactly, right? Like, and the whole idea is that at some point I do believe like this will become even better and better. Like integration does have its nuances, and it still has like a lot of like issues in general, right? But like at some point you're almost getting to that stage where like autonomous agents that could sort of take in ingest an app, figure it out, and sort of integrate it and like get it out with, is almost getting there.
Wow, that's amazing, man. It's really, really, really beautiful. Really, I would say
Yeah.
again, magical to hear.
Yeah.
So okay, so now to achieve so much of thought process, build a world class product, you also need a world class team. So how has been experience in hiring? As we discussed at the start of the podcast, that Indian ecosystem still maturing. Our talent density for that kind of talent may still be less because a lot of people end up going to the US through higher education and end up staying there, right? So how has your hiring experience has been, hiring strategy? What are your few, I would say mantras to hire?
Yeah, I think like we made like way too many mistakes in hiring in general, and so a lot of like
Everyone does. That's one thing.
yeah, a lot of learnings there. But like I think like what I kind of realized is that like there are different ways you think about like what good looks like in hiring, right? So like when you're just starting a company, like and you're making your first hires, like the idea of good is that hey, here's a person who can do something decently, like let's say some engineer who can code decently, and so this is good, right? And like I can go with it. This is, as you said, the talent density in India is really really low, and so like I can live with it, right? Then you realize as you sort of company grows that maybe the good is not like someone who does something well. Good is like someone who scales with the company well, right? And so as sort of team becomes bigger and like you have now, rather than two people you have like five people in the company, is this a person who can like sort of work and like who's been able to sort of do it with five people, like who's actually improving with the company, who's like sort of becoming better and better as company grows and grows, right? And like I think you realize that you never judged for it, and so you go back to drawing board and you're like, okay, now the good looks like this. And then at some point the company grows even further and you have like way too much traffic coming in and like you are going down like a lot, and so you realize, oh, but there are some things that you can't just learn from like just like coding. And if you're young and like you read a lot and you get it, like there's some things you just learn from experience. And so do we have anyone who has that experience to bring on and like who has seen the sort of battles and scars and like who has gotten the battle scars, right? And you're like, oh shit, we didn't really hire for that, right? And so then you do those things, right? It's like you hire for people who have kind of like maybe once in a while seen like those sort of days, right? And like who has seen 0 to 1. And so like I think like there are nuances that you sort of keep learning as the team grows, as the company changes, as the product changes. People who have started up, and like we kind of optimized for that simply because like we wanted to hire for folks who have seen 0 to 1 journey, who have seen the pain of product not working, who have seen the pain of product working. Because like for folks who have kind of gone through that, the resistance to pain is way too high.
So how do you interview people right now? How do you interview engineers? Is there a
Yeah.
method that you've changed? Your
That
traditional method was, people will apply or you will reach out, then somebody or you will, sift through that, filter, then you'll have a few rounds of interview, maybe you'll give a coding test, and then you based on that you decide. Have you stuck to that route or have you used something totally different or experimented with it?
it's very different right now. It's a lot more structured right now,
Hmm.
because we know exactly for each role what we are judging for.
Right.
We didn't have that in the initial days. Now, what we do is like for every role that we think about for hiring, we have an initial, like some resemblance of like what are we exactly judging for? What are the qualities we want this person to have? We kind of reverse engineer the person in terms of like, hey, here's this sort of like day to day what looks like for that person. Here's what the person should be really good at. Here's where I'm okay if the person's not the best, right? Here are the things that the person probably has done before in his like past experience. And so we kind of create that kind of a mapping. Based on that mapping, we try to do outbound and we try to find people who have kind of been in that journey. And then like we try to get on calls with them, um, try to explain to them like why Composio could be a really good opportunity, reversal to them, eventually sort of do the structured sort of rounds where like we try to figure out like if the hypothesis of like of this person having those qualities is correct or not, and eventually hire them. So it's a very different kind of process.
Got it.
Yeah.
And now I know you and Karan have moved to the US, right? And there's a lot of debate going on. Should you for creating an AI company, you have to move to the Valley or to the US, even if it is East Coast, New York, or somewhere in the East Coast, right? What is your thought process of people who are starting today?
It's a way.
What is your experience has been? Is it really necessary to be in the US to create an AI company?
So like the way I think about it for myself is like things that have worked for me better being in India is that you are kind of a little bit away from the noise. Um, so the thing with like SF specifically is that like SF has like a lot of really smart people and a lot of really opinionated people. And what I've realized is that unless you have a natural tendency, like which is like you've been there for like years, and like you have like kind of outgrown that like really strong influence. If you directly go from here to SF, the first thing you'll realize is that everyone just sounds like so into like what you have been doing that you get influenced very quickly, very easily. And a lot of your product decision making might change very quickly, some for the good, some for the worse. And like that is something that is not always the best thing you want. I would recommend maybe build the initial hypothesis and the product here, but like build it on the basis of your journey to that city. And when I say journey to SF, I mean like spending months there. But like don't mix it up. Like that's the nuance.
So what do we expect now? Of course, not to count, you were the first one to come in Forbes top AI guy in India. How does it feel?
I'm not a scammer yet.
Okay.
Like eventually maybe. It's yeah, it's risky, right?
Right.
Like now there's a stamp on my back.
Right.
Potential.
The pressure to perform.
No, I meant like the scammer, like FTX Theranos.
Okay.
We have enough examples. Like I meant, oh, what really matters? Happy wife matters. Like things that like matter are very different for me. Like I think like a customer smiling matters way more. Right. A customer live and proud matters way more. All the other things are like fine. Like
I
it's,
understand.
it's good. Me and Karan Karan's my co-founder. We both started like a macro trading company back in like the second startup I talked about, right? And like we both get excited by making the calls, right? Debating about it, like thinking really deeply about it. I think that's what like drives us like on a day-to-day basis. It's just like learning and like doing.
And in the long horizon, how do you see Composio shipping up?
I think like
You are in a very, just to for the audience, really great position where you can become a default, system for integration between LLMs or
yeah,
other systems, right?
it's like I feel like it's a very strong word, but like the way I would think about it is I want to own software communications, right?
Right.
So like let's say in long horizons, like how would like let's just say we get to a point where it's like almost AGI-ish kind of software out there which can do anything or everything. Like how would those sort of AGI-ish softwares communicate with each other? Is something I would want like Composio to kind of own. I know it's a very, very long horizon thing, but yeah, that's
You never know in AI, nothing is long horizon. The definition of long horizon is changing
yeah.
every single day. But I'm really glad you have a purpose to own the software communication piece, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we need more coming from this ecosystem
Yeah.
to make sure we can stay relevant in the world of AI globally.
Yeah, I don't know, maybe own is not the right word, but like basically the way I would think about it is like we are building AGI for communications, if you
Right.
really think about it. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of summarizing AGF for communication. But I'm really excited to see a company in India who's having 200,000 developers, 1 million API calls, 50,000 integrations, competing with the best in the world.
Yeah.
So all the best to you. Will be with you in your journey. Thank you very much, Soham. Really enjoyed our conversation. And I hope audience also got what they're looking for. So
Yeah.
thanks for doing this.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, folks.